True or false, is your face melting?
Yeah, you have to study really hard for that test. Yeah.
If the answer is true, then you have the disease.
Yeah. Welcome to Hello PhD, a podcast for scientists and the people who love them. Today on the show, we help make sense of the statistics that you see in the headlines. Stay with us.
And we're back. This is Hello PhD, episode 53. I'm Joshua Hall.
And I'm Daniel Arneman.
And we'll discuss the human side of science and life in the lab. Dan, I feel like it's been forever.
I have definitely missed this. It was very odd to take a 2-week break.
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't listened to last week's episode yet, we have moved to every 2 weeks. But hey, I feel very refreshed.
We're here. We're back.
Yeah, so if we seem more fresh than usual, it could be the week off, or it could be this beer we're drinking.
It is a tasty one. Little bit spicy, which is exciting.
Spicy this week. So Dan, this is cool. So one of the reasons, obviously, we started the podcast was we had this dream that people would send us free beer.
Yep.
And that's happened before.
The dream has come true repeatedly.
Yeah, it's been a while, but this beer was sent to us by a listener.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Who do we have to thank?
Well, this is cool. This is from Lindsay Walton, and Lindsay is a chemistry PhD student at UNC Chapel Hill. And I met Lindsay at the Triangle ComSciCon, so a science communication conference.
Sci-Fi-Con.
And Lindsay, besides being a listener, which makes her super cool, also has a connection to a new local nano brew called Dingo Dog Brewing Company in Carborough, North Carolina.
We're down to nano brews. We were at micro. What happened?
Well, so apparently, microbrew is pretty big. I actually tried to find a definition of what constitutes a nano brew, and I don't feel like I need to define the relative scale of these breweries.
You sure
because
don't, yeah.
Our scientifically literate audience should know their their prefix units, micro, nano. But I actually saw nano, there's really no set amount of beer besides less than micro, and micro is actually bigger than you would think. But sometimes nano brew is synonymous with pico brew, which kind of made me mad because
those are not the same thing.
That's like a factor of 1,000 different, right?
Is an Addo brew where you just like missed like you get a spritz of something that they made?
It could be, but so anyway, being a nano brew is between whatever we were and like Sierra Nevada, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a pretty big difference.
So anyway, let me tell you. So this is from Dingo Dog Brewing in Carborough. They're a brand new nano brew, and they say from their website they produce beverages from produce grown on site, which is cool, and they use all their profits to fund grants for local no-kill animal rescue organizations.
That is cool. Feel good about this one. If it were not burning my throat, I'd feel good about it. Did you say what it was yet?
I didn't. So this is the Habanero IPA.
Yeah, and it actually has habanero flavor.
Yeah, let me tell you what I like about this beer. One of my pet peeves are beers that have some ingredient in the title, and then you taste it, and in no way do you taste that ingredient. I think we've encountered that on the show before.
The salsa-fee beer that just doesn't taste enough like salsa-fee.
What?
It's a nerve. You not heard of salsa-fee?
I've never heard of that.
We'll look it up.
So I actually have had some of these spicy beers that supposedly have peppers in them, and you don't often really even taste it at all, and that's kind of annoying. This one, you can taste the habanero. It's in there. But this is good. I feel like it's the perfect balance of IPA flavor and spice, and I feel like I even get a little butterscotch. It's a beautiful flavor, a beautiful color, and just the right amount of spice.
You have to turn up the air conditioning in here because I'm starting to sweat.
That's right. If we get the sweats, I've got a cup of water next to my beer. But anyway, thanks to Lindsay, definitely, and thanks to Dingo Dog Brewing for the free beer. And if you're out there and you want us to have free beer, we'll gladly accept it.
We have not turned one down yet, I don't think.
And if you're in the Chapel Hill, Carborough area, check out Dingo Dog. All right, Dan. So I think you took the lead this week. You had something that you thought was pretty interesting. You wanted to talk about.
This news story has been on my mind a lot recently. Have you heard of a company called Theranos?
I don't know that I have. Is that like thermos? Like you put your hot beverages in? Or?
So close.
Not the same thing.
No. You've heard of Theranos because they're making a lot of news. It's a health tech company that has claimed it's going to revolutionize the medical testing industry.
Oh, yeah, they do like diagnostic stuff.
Yeah,
They had some kind of little thing that they made.
Yeah, some chip type thing, and you're supposed to send a few drops of blood, and they'd be able to tell you every disease you could possibly get. Well, have you heard the more recent news about them then?
They've revolutionized the world of diagnostics.
That is not the case. The Wall Street Journal did some investigation and discovered that they were, I think this is very common in startups. You were kind of faking it till you make it. You make sure that there's a market for the thing you want. So they were running a lot of their tests on traditional lab equipment, not new technology. And they've been getting in trouble more recently with regulators, so much so that the CEO of this company has been like legally barred from running a lab facility for 2 years.
But isn't it kind of weird? I mean, I've never heard of anything like this, but they came to this conclusion, and they didn't say you're not fit to ever serve in this capacity. They said for 2 years.
Yeah, maybe in 2 years you're.
In 2 years' time, though.
Go sit on the bench and then come back and do healthcare.
I will say, Dan, I had really not heard much about this until you brought it to my attention, but I was doing a little reading. So the CEO, Elizabeth Holmes, did you know she actually dropped out of Stanford at 19 to start this company?
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is.
Yeah, we talked about that a while back, right? Like these people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs. So, I mean, she was this kind of child prodigy, and actually it was one of her science faculty members encouraged her to do that, and he actually ended up serving on her advisory board once she left Stanford and started this company.
Well, I think that's why.
And that was in 2003, by the way.
Right.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago, and I think that's why part of the reason this company got so much attention early on is because it was this story of a person who dropped out and was revolutionizing the healthcare industry. And the promise was, we are going to take a few drops of your blood and tell you every possible thing that's wrong so that you never have to say, I wish I had known that I was going to get cancer or diabetes or...
This is sort of like the blood test version of like 23andMe, like the genetics testing. I see.
That was the promise, and I think now people are trying to determine, is there actually technology there? But this article I came across on 538 blog, hopefully you read 538.
I love 538.
It's
I'm
great.
a big fan. Nate Silver.
Yeah, and the question that they asked is, do we actually need more blood tests? Regardless of the fact of is there a new technology here? Can they do it? Is it better than everybody else? Is this even a good thing if we screen everybody in America or around the world for these diseases?
Yeah, I mean, again, thinking about the genetics testing, I mean, one of the big risks of that people brought up were, you test for everything. What's your insurance company going to say? Who gets a hold of that information? Let's say you do find out you have restless ear syndrome, and then your insurance company gets a hold.
Thanks for bringing it up. Yeah,
and then suddenly
very sensitive about that. My headphones barely stay on.
I know it's weird. His headphones are like 6 inches from his ears, but yeah, your insurance policy gets canceled because you find out you had this rare thing that you never would have known about otherwise.
Yeah, there are some of the privacy concerns, but the interesting part of this article and the thing that has had me kind of captivated is understanding the statistics behind doing these tests. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because I think the actual answer is counterintuitive. So you're going to see some numbers that seem like they're really promising and it's going to be a great technology. But I want to walk you through an example where I think you'll see that it is not the result you expected.
Did you know 48% of statistics are made up?
I did know that. At least the ones on this show, probably true. Okay, Josh, I think it's best to do this with an example. You've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I love that movie.
Okay, at the end, they open the Ark and everybody's face melts.
Yes.
Let's say that was a disease. Face melting syndrome.
Face melting syndrome.
I mean, it'd be
sounds bad.
It'd be a really bad disease to have. But you and I have just come up with a test that it is really incredible way of detecting face melting syndrome. So congratulations to us.
Yeah, mine would be a multiple choice test. It'd be like, true or false, is your face melting?
Yeah, you have to study really hard for that test, yeah.
If the answer is true, then you have the disease.
Yeah. So let's say our test can detect cases of face melting syndrome 90% of the time. You feel pretty good about that.
Okay, so 90% of the time,
if you have it,
it,
we will notice.
Our test will tell you.
Yep.
Okay.
And the other side of that coin is it's going to do a really good job. If we say you don't have face melting syndrome, it will rule it out 95% of the time. So if we say you don't have it, 95% of the time, you don't have face melting syndrome.
All right, Dan, but I love probability. I love statistics. So, and I'm cynical, I guess, or pessimistic. So I'm thinking, okay, but you're telling me 10% of the time I will have it, and yet the test will say that I don't have it.
That's
or 5% of the time I won't have it, and the test will say that I do.
Yeah.
I have to say I'm actually less concerned about not having it and getting a false positive. Because,
you're less concerned? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would probably be freaked out for a little while, but I assume there's probably a follow-up secondary thing you could do that would take a little bit of time. But I think what would be more concerning to me is I get this false sense of security 1 out of 10 times that, oh, cool, I don't have it.
1 in 10 guys walking down the street, his face melts. That's it.
Didn't know.
Yeah. Could have known, yeah.
Did all he could do.
So you might want to work on improving that first number, but there's another piece of information I have to give you, and then I'm going to ask you a question. And I want to hear just your kind of intuition around these numbers. So if I tell you that 2% of the population, which is a lot, has like latent face melting syndrome genes or whatever, can you tell me what percentage of the time we get the diagnosis right? Let me phrase it a different way. If I tell you that you have face melting syndrome, the test comes back positive, what is the probability that you actually have it? So this is the question about, I've told you have it. Now, you talked about doing some follow-up tests and things like that. What's the probability that you actually have it?
That I actually have it?
Based on my test.
Well, I guess
it's a really tough one.
Well, I guess the probability.
Ballpark it for me. I don't need the actual answer. Just like,
I mean,
are you
90%.
Yeah, you're really likely to have it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what everybody thinks. And it's totally not true. So I want to walk you through why it's not true. And this is why this story is so compelling to me, because we read these headlines, I've got a test and it's 90% true, or it detects 90% of the cases. And here's the actual reality. So let's say we have 1,000 people in our test group, and we know that 2% of them have the disease. So that's 20 people that actually have face melting syndrome. 980 people don't have the disease. That seems pretty reasonable. So we've got 20 people that have it. We're going to get 90% of those right. So we've got 18 people that test positive that have the disease, and 2 of those people, we don't catch it. And that was the thing you were worried about, like the 2 guys walking down the street whose face melted. You don't have bad luck, do you? You're the luckiest person I know, I think.
I have great luck. I make my own luck, Dan.
You know that. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. So now let's get to the people that they don't have face melting syndrome.
Okay, so let's recap. So we had 1,000 people.
Yep.
20 of them have face melting syndrome.
They do. 2%, we said.
Okay. So of those, well, I guess what I'm asking is, why did just those did everybody get tested?
So this
all
is
1,000 got
tested. This is the premise of Theranos, right? Everybody gets a test.
Okay.
But only, let's say, 2% have it. So 20 people actually have it. 1,000 people got the test.
And 18 of those 20 people would get a positive result. You have it.
Yep.
2 of those,
and it's 20, true, they do have
and
it.
And they do. 2 of those people would get a negative test, even though they do have it.
We missed them.
What about the 5% of the 980 people who don't actually have it, but they're going to get a positive result? Do we care about them?
Yeah, we sure do. So the people that don't have the disease, we're going to actually tell 49 of them that they are positive for face melting syndrome.
Ooh, so that's actually more people than actually had the disease.
49 of, yeah. 49.
So from a number standpoint, we were incorrect more than...
So now you do the math. We got 18 of them right, and we got 49 of them that we told had the disease, and they didn't. This comes out to 27% positive. So
I think I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
This is the problem. So you do this screen on 1,000 people, and you tell all you tell all these people that they have this disease, and only 27% of them actually have it. Now, that's fine if there's like a easy follow-up test, but if these people have to go on treatment, or they have to have a surgery or something to treat face melting syndrome, it can have a huge cost. And not to mention the stress of thinking you're going to have your face melt.
Yeah, I mean, I immediately start thinking about, all right, let's think about real numbers here. So if this actually came to fruition in the United States, and I just pulled up, so in 2014, there were 319 million people. So let's say 300 million people, okay? And there was a disease, let's use our face melting syndrome, 2% of that 300 million have the disease. Okay, so 6 million people have it, but that means that 294 million people don't have it. So if we have a 5% false positive rate, then that's 5% of 296 million. 29
14
14
million?
Yeah, so about
14.7
14
million?
or 15 million people
Yeah.
will incorrectly think they have face melting syndrome.
Right.
And then how many will we have actually gotten right of the people who had it? So that would be 90% of the 6 million, which would be about, well, a little over 5 million.
Yeah. So I guess.
So we got 5 million right, and we got 15 million wrong.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And if the treatment is particularly terrible, which in a lot of cases it can be, or the follow-up testing is really terrible, you can actually do more harm than good. And so they're really important numbers here. So, your temptation would be, let's improve that 90% where we're actually detecting the disease. But the problem is in the 95% where we're saying, 95% of the time we're confident you don't have it when you test negative. But that's the number that matters when you're doing these broad screens.
Oh, man, and I said I wasn't worried about that. Can I change my answer?
You can change it. The other number to keep in mind, so when you see these numbers in the headlines, this is what I want you to think about. 2% of the population, we said, had face melting syndrome. If only 0.5% had it, let's say it's more rare, which is still pretty common, you would have a 9% accuracy. So you would be testing, you'd still tell 50 people out of 1,000 that they have the disease when only 4.5 of them actually had it. So it gets even worse the more rare this thing is that you're screening for.
Wow. So you're saying, so the more rare it is, the higher the ratio of wrongly diagnosed people to correctly diagnosed people
these
gets.
Three important numbers. And the first one we call the sensitivity. How sensitive is our test to detecting this disease? And then the second number is specificity. Is it just detecting the disease, or is it detecting a lot of other things too?
Well, and I'm thinking also, Dan, I mean, the original goal was not just to test people for one specific disease, but for an entire panel of different diseases. So you could imagine.
Oh, good. More chances to win.
Right. So any given person would likely get at least one positive, whether they were.
Yeah, right. If you test for enough, you keep rolling the dice. One of these things we're going to tell you have.
Yeah, and that's from statistics. That's for the whole pitfall of doing multiple comparisons, right? If you do enough t-tests, eventually you're going to get a p-value of less than 0.05 just because you did. If you do 100 t-tests, 5 of them will likely be less than 0.05 just by chance.
Keep going. Then
That's
you can
the
publish
definition.
it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's
or
right.
Or start a company. So, I thought this was really compelling that it's not just do they have the technology, but is this really something we want? And what I think this leads to in the medical field is, the idea of Theranos is that you're doing self-testing, and the danger is you're doing self-interpretation. So if, we know about WebMD. I go on WebMD, I have cancer. It's a guarantee. But when you tell people you are positive, you're testing positive for this disease, they don't have a nuanced statistical understanding of what testing positive means. They think positive means positive. So I think it's a really dangerous road. And there really is, I think there's a cost to this overdiagnosis. Have you paid any attention to the breast cancer screening rules?
No, I haven't.
Well, let me tell you. In 2011, there was a review where they analyzed the actual effectiveness of doing routine mammography for women. And basically, they determined that in a lot of groups, it's actually possibly doing more harm than good to routinely screen. So some of the numbers for women in their 50s, which are more likely to have it. So now this is the number of what is the percentage of people that are really going to have a problem in that group. For every 1,000 women that were screened over the age of 50, over the course of 10 years, one woman's life would be extended due to detection out of that 1,000. 2 to 10 would be overdiagnosed and treated for cancer that would have stopped growing or gone away on its own. 5 to 15 would have been treated for breast cancer with the same outcome that they would have had if it had not been detected early. 500 would be incorrectly told they might have breast cancer. And 125 to 250 would undergo a breast biopsy. All of these things expose you to risk. And so they've been changing the recommendations on breast cancer screening for this basically statistical reason. Same for prostate health. And
Well, actually, no, I think I remember seeing some headlines about the recommended age for mammograms was recently increased.
For people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, hopefully this makes more sense now. When we went from a 2% prevalence of the disease to a 0.5%, you saw how the actual screening made things worse. And this is what's happening. So in a younger population where you are less likely to have the disease, now you are overdiagnosing more.
Okay, so what's the answer? I mean, we want to know if we have a health issue, that many health issues, early detection can be a really important component to treating the disease, like many types of cancer, for example. So what are we to do?
Yeah, it's tough. The statistics don't actually help you out here, except I think they point you to where you need to look for improvement and how you need to interpret the results. So if we're looking at a population of people, it's easier for us to say, well, saving that one person's life may not be worth making 500 other people undergo surgery. I mean, I think that's very painful math to do and to say that from a moral and human perspective, but that's what the demographics tell you.
Well, and maybe one piece of the puzzle is going counter to what Theranos envisioned, which was let's screen everyone for everything. But maybe you're a little bit smarter about it and you say, okay, you know what? I have a family history of prostate cancer or breast cancer.
Maybe
so
the prevalence in my
sense.
group is 10%. Now we're talking about a really different math problem.
Exactly. Wow, that's really fascinating, Dan. I wasn't aware of some of these things.
Yeah, I think the thing that has me thinking about it is because it's not intuitive, not even easy to explain. Like, I don't know that I could explain it to my grandmother. And so we're making all these health decisions, but we're doing it without a true sense of the probabilities. And I think we can make a lot of mistakes that way.
Yeah, and you really could see how a company like Theranos or someone else who's trying to pitch diagnostics do your PowerPoint presentation and you say, we can predict this with 99% certainty. And
sounds really great.
The negative rate is only, even 0.5%. But when we start thinking about actual numbers of rare diseases, it changes the equation a little bit.
And there are tests that I'm sure, and 4 nines and 5 nines and whatever. There are tests that are extremely accurate, very sensitive, very specific, and that's where we need to push the technology before we start screening people randomly.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. Is this is not necessarily saying testing is bad, but I think you're saying indiscriminate blanket testing.
Yes, yeah,
leads to an issue. But if you have a reason to think, and I think a good example would be, think about infectious disease. If you're having symptoms and, your medical provider is trying to narrow down or figure out what's wrong with you, then targeted testing makes a lot of sense. And maybe that's really what it originally was designed to do.
Yeah, if you're in the tropics, if you visited the tropics, it might make sense to be tested for some tropical diseases.
Yeah, get your Zika test.
Yeah, did you have malaria? But
Yeah.
if I'm sitting inside my house all day in, Quebec, I probably don't need a malaria test. Although there is some probability that it would come up positive, right?
Yeah, it sounds that way. I remember this was years ago, soon after my wife and I were married, and my wife had this panel of tests done, and they tested her blood for 20 or 30 different levels of things. And of course, one,
some of them are out of spec.
There's a range, right? And I even remember the paper. I can remember this very, very clearly. The way that the paper was formatted, the report was formatted, was it gave you the range, it gave you the number, and if the number happened to be outside of the range, it made that number red. And so there was this one red number. It was like your potassium level or something random. You didn't know what it meant. It was a little bit out of that range. And I remember she asked her doctor, okay, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, it's probably nothing, or it could be a brain tumor.
But, is that the alternative?
Yeah.
Nothing or a brain tumor?
So honest to goodness, Dan, so it could be nothing, it could be a brain tumor. Well, so then the obvious follow-up is, well, how do I, I want to...
Well, you can't ignore it then, right?
Yeah, let's make sure it's...
What kind of negligent monster would you be if you didn't go get follow-up tests?
And so the only way to determine that was do an MRI. And, of course, I was a grad student at the time, and we didn't have a lot of money, and insurance doesn't like to pay for just random MRIs. So it was like, okay, we can pay $500 and rule out a brain tumor because this one number was a little outside the range, or you can ignore it. But that's a lot to ask.
It's a lot. And if the probability had gone a different way and it was a brain tumor, you would never have forgiven yourself for not doing it.
So, of course.
It's a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the routine screening for things that are probably not risk factors. It's not just the emotional distress. It's not just the invasiveness of some of the test procedures. It really does cost a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dan, thanks for...
That was heavy, yeah.
That was great. That really opened my eyes to some things. And, if anybody else has some thoughts on this, or you've come across some interesting studies, or maybe even bumped up against the trickiness of intuition as it relates to probability in your own research, we'd love to hear about it. This is pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I would love to have a biostatistics course that's based on interpreting news articles.
Geez.
Biostatistics is all about, like when I took it, it was all coin flips and chi-squares. But take a news article and make sense of it. I think that would be a valuable training in grad school. So somebody call me if you actually have found that.
All right, Dan, it's been 2 weeks, but do you remember what the etymology puzzle was?
What is an etymology? I don't know.
Had something, I actually don't remember.
Okay, well, I've got it here in front of me. Of course you don't. The clue 2 weeks ago was this blood component loves the color of the dawn.
Oh, it was this on purpose? It was a blood clue, and we talked about blood
it wasn't,
testing.
but it worked out, yeah.
I love it when a plan comes together.
How are you with answers on this one?
I had a couple guesses that I actually told you off mic last time, and I was wrong. So I'm not even going to repeat them here.
Whenever you see the word love in one of my clues, you can be pretty sure the PHIL root is going to be in there somewhere. So the answer this week was eosinophil, and this is a kind of a double-layered etymology. So have you ever done H&E staining?
I have.
Okay. So the E stands for...
eosin.
Eosin, right? And eosin is a dye. Now, what color is eosin, Josh?
So that is that's the red and pink one. There's the hematoxylin's the dark blue, the purple one, and then eosin's the red, pink one.
Perfect. So eosinophils were named because they absorb the red dye. They love the eosin, right? Eos was an ancient Greek word for dawn and the name of the ancient Greek goddess of the dawn. So you can see 2 layers there. Loves the color of the dawn. Eosinophil.
I love when there are biological terms like these cell types that literally the name we use for them has to do with how they were originally observed.
Yeah, this one reminded me of chromosome, which was, I think, episode 2, color body, because it absorbed dye.
Yeah.
Could have been called...
That's pretty cool.
Could have been called Jim.
This protein is called 30 kb on the gelatin.
I think you got a future in product naming.
I think it's catchy.
Yeah, it is. Let me give you the clue for next week. And this is another summertime clue taken from my real-life adventures. When walking through the woods, watch out for this genus of poisonous tree climbers. I'll read it one more time. When walking through the woods, watch out for this genus of poisonous tree climbers. If you think you know the answer, email it to puzzle@hellophd.com, and I will randomly select a winner from all the correct responses and send the lucky puzzler an Amazon gift card.
All right, Dan. Great episode. Good to have you back in the studio.
It was good to be back, Josh. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, and here we are in our second year, and we really want your ideas for future topics on the show. So if there's something you'd like to talk about, either a big topic or something crazy that's happened to you in the lab, we want to hear about it. Email us podcast@hellophd.com or send us a tweet. We love to read those. If you like the show, leave us an iTunes review. That helps other people find the show, and we get a kick out of reading it. Again, thank you to Lindsay for the fantastic habanero IPA. I've got my glass of milk right next to my beer to cool down.
My collar is drenched. My hair is drenched. It's good.
No, it's quite good. It's balanced nicely. If you want to help us get some beer in the future, you can go to our website, hellophd.com, and click through our Amazon banner. Make sure your ad blocker's off. Buy something on Amazon, and we will get a small kickback that helps us with hosting the show.
All right, Josh. Well, I will see you in a fortnight.
See you in a fortnight. Is that true? What is a fortnight?
A fortnight is 2 weeks.
Is it really?
I'm going to look it up. Fortnight is a unit of time equal to 14 days. It's on Wikipedia, so see you in a fortnight, Josh.
See you in a fortnight.